The ballroom fell silent when the black single father calmly told the billionaire woman standing in front of him that he spoke 9 languages. She stared at him for a second, then burst into laughter so loud that several wealthy guests turned in their chairs to watch. To her, he was only a waiter in a borrowed black vest, carrying folded napkins while millionaires discussed investments over crystal glasses. But what she did not know was that the man she had just laughed at had spent years learning languages for a reason far more powerful than money, status, or applause. And before the afternoon sun disappeared behind the enormous windows of that luxury hotel, the entire room would learn why. If you believe kindness can change a person's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who may need a little hope today. The man was named Malachi Reed, a 36-year-old single father who had learned to become many things at once: a cook, a cleaner, a teacher, a nurse, and sometimes a storyteller when his 8-year-old daughter, Zuri, could not sleep. Every morning, before the city became crowded, Malachi packed Zuri's lunch, braided her hair as carefully as his large hands allowed, and walked her to school. Then he hurried across town to work at the Grand Aurelia Hotel, where he served wealthy guests who rarely noticed the people carrying their plates. Malachi had once dreamed of becoming a professional translator, but life had changed his plans. After Zuri's mother died unexpectedly years earlier, he had chosen fatherhood over every other dream. He kept studying whenever he could, often reading language books late at night after Zuri fell asleep. Spanish, French, Arabic, Mandarin, Portuguese, German, Italian, Japanese, and Swahili slowly became part of his world. He never learned them to impress anyone. He learned them because he believed knowledge was something nobody could take away from him. That bright afternoon, the Grand Aurelia was hosting one of the most important charity luncheons of the year. The guest of honor was Celestine Laurent, a billionaire businesswoman famous for her luxury technology empire and her sharp personality. She arrived wearing an emerald green dress that shimmered beneath the daylight pouring through the ballroom windows. Around her sat investors, diplomats, executives, and celebrities. Malachi was assigned to her table, where he moved quietly between guests, making sure everyone had what they needed. Everything was going smoothly until 2 international businessmen began speaking rapidly in French, assuming nobody else nearby understood them. They were discussing a private deal and laughing about how expensive the hotel's catering was. Malachi accidentally overheard enough to realize they were planning to embarrass Celestine during the upcoming negotiation. When Malachi quietly informed her that the men were discussing her business strategy, Celestine looked at him with disbelief. She asked how he could possibly know what they were saying. Malachi simply answered that he understood French. One of the guests nearby laughed and asked whether the waiter was claiming to be some kind of genius. Malachi remained calm and explained that he spoke 9 languages. Celestine could not contain herself. She laughed, not because she was cruel, but because the claim seemed impossible coming from a man carrying a tray of sparkling water. She jokingly challenged him to prove it. Instead of becoming angry, Malachi placed the tray down and politely greeted the guests in French. Then he switched effortlessly into Spanish, followed by Arabic, Mandarin, Portuguese, German, Italian, Japanese, and finally Swahili. Each language came with a different rhythm and accent, and his confidence never disappeared. The laughter stopped almost instantly. The room became so quiet that the soft clinking of silverware seemed loud. One diplomat stood up in astonishment and answered him in Arabic. Malachi responded without hesitation. Another guest spoke French, and Malachi replied naturally. Then Celestine's expression changed completely. She realized he had not memorized a few impressive phrases. He genuinely understood people. The man she had dismissed as a waiter was communicating with guests from across the world as though he had spent his entire life traveling between their countries. But Malachi's greatest surprise was still waiting. One of the businessmen who had been speaking French suddenly became nervous. Malachi revealed that their conversation was not merely about insulting the catering. They had been discussing confidential information connected to Celestine's company and intended to use it against her during a major international contract negotiation. The billionaire immediately called her security team. Within minutes, the two men were escorted away for questioning. Celestine looked at Malachi differently now. She asked where he had learned so many languages. For the first time that afternoon, his confidence softened. He explained that after becoming a father, he had promised Zuri that he would never stop learning. He wanted her to understand that being poor did not mean being powerless. He wanted her to see that a person could lose a job, a house, or a dream and still rebuild a future through patience and courage. Every night, after putting Zuri to bed, he studied. Sometimes he fell asleep with a dictionary open beside him. Sometimes he studied while washing dishes. Sometimes he learned vocabulary on the bus because he could not afford to waste a minute. Celestine looked toward the ballroom windows, where the warm afternoon sunlight spilled across the polished floor. For years, she had surrounded herself with people who wanted something from her. Yet this man had never asked her for anything. He had protected her simply because it was right. That realization humbled her. A week later, Malachi received an unexpected invitation. Celestine offered him a position with her international foundation, helping families and children communicate across language barriers. The salary was more than he had ever imagined, but Malachi hesitated. He asked whether the job would allow him enough time to remain a father. Celestine smiled and promised that his daughter would never have to compete with his career. Months later, Malachi stood in a bright community center funded by Celestine's foundation. Children from different countries sat together, learning from one another. Zuri sat proudly in the front row while her father spoke to the children in several languages. Celestine watched from the back of the room, no longer laughing at him. She was smiling because she finally understood something she had forgotten. Wealth could purchase comfort, but it could never purchase the courage of a father who refused to give up. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Heartline Stories. Sometimes the person we overlook is carrying the very gift the world desperately needs. And before we end, here is a special request. Comment, kindness sees beyond status. If you believe every person deserves to be respected for who they are, not for what they wear or how much money they have. Malachi never became extraordinary because he spoke 9 languages. He became extraordinary because he used those languages to connect people instead of separating them. He taught his daughter that dignity does not come from a bank account, a designer suit, or a famous name. It comes from the way you treat people when you believe nobody important is watching. And perhaps that is the lesson worth remembering. The next time you see someone serving your food, cleaning a building, driving a bus, or simply standing quietly in the corner of a crowded room, remember that you may know nothing about the battles they have survived, the dreams they carry, or the talents they have spent years developing in silence. Never laugh at someone's beginning. You might be standing in front of a future that has not yet been discovered.